No,
Okay. Um,
boring is what boring is very interesting.
so one thing that you often have to suffer through are bad bass solos as a jazz musician. Bass solos that go on and on. I mean, there are examples of it's just a feature of
Imitate one for me.
I couldn't even.
You can't be boring.
And the intonation is, kind of sketchy, unless it's a really great bass player. So the speaker of this text is in a band, and a bass player named Shramp Wadhams is playing a cadenza, and he's bored out of his mind, and he begins to drift. This is a fictitious person.
No, which one is boring?
The speaker, it does not play the bass, but he's listening to this bass solo,
And he is getting bored.
and he is getting bored, and so his mind begins to drift. The House of Forms is a fictitious bar. June, midnight, a final set at the House of Forms. As Shramp Wadhams drags us by the hair through another of his interminable bass cadenzas, I conceive a precision brush composed of suprasensitive... Oh, sorry, I should say that this is one of a series of bass solos that the speaker is bored by, and then imagines some invention of his. They're always inventions. They're machines. They're magical machines.
Rube Goldberg.
Yes, very Rube Goldberg. June, midnight, a final set at the House of Forms. As Shramp Wadhams drags us by the hair through another of his interminable bass cadenzas, I conceive a precision brush composed of suprasensitive cilia, which, when passed over a finely variegated surface, converts those patterned textures into sound. Legion the difficulties in engineering such a device. As the object to be sounded passes from a preliminary staging ramp through the reading theater, any raised area on its surface will excite, just like tiny nubs on the cylinder of a music box, the ranks of electrified hairs, and thereby produce an auditory signal. Staggering to imagine the number and fineness of these hairs, let alone the efforts involved to convert them into infinitely sensitive transducers, and the arduous search for objects whose surface texture might yield something more than mere white noise. I could spend hours feeding things into it, coins, feathers, leaves, bits of cloth, with no promise at all of a positive result. Days, weeks, months even, of unremitting noise. It could prove impossible to know for certain whether I'm not merely projecting sense onto the fugitive, exiguous decibels in which I detect some hint of organized sound. Might as well try to find a beetle scuttling through a field on a windy day from 500 feet aloft. Gradually, I intuit that one must tune the reader according to the grain of the surface to be sounded. The seasons pass. I tune and I feed, and tune and feed. And then one afternoon, near to giving up for the day, happening on a dragonfly's wing, I feed it in and hear, through a thicket of transients, the distinct sound of breakers crashing on rocks, and the single, if truncated, cry of a gull. A full 6 seconds, I reverse the direction of the feed platform, run the wing back through without altering its position, run it forward a second time, and hear again the crashing wave, the gull's clipped cry. The fidelity of reproduction cannot be denied. But to whose experience am I listening? Or are these legible 6 seconds some sort of sensuous universal, one of an infinite number of bits of auditory experience written on the dragonfly's wing according to some incalculable combination of chance and intention. While playing the specimen over and over in my excitement, I jar the reader and alter the attitude of the wing on the platform. When again I run it under the brushes, the signal is lost to the depths of time. Night after night I feed wings into the reader. Ibuprofen jars full of wingless damselflies accumulate in the hermetic chamber I've designed exclusively for my work. I think of nothing but that gull and that wave. Damn them. And then a month later, after innumerable alterations, I hear, scored across the wing of a cloudless sulfur, several seconds of anonymous chamber music. Transports. After further adjustment, weeks later, I hear several seconds of a thrush's song along the margin of a sumac leaf. With each discovery, I make voluminous notations as to the position of the object on the platform, the nature and relative density of pattern on its surface, and tune the reader accordingly. A full 12 seconds of traffic along a section of silk, the heavy breathing and death moans of some huge animal on a bit of cedar shake. One would attempt at his peril to correlate the material with the sounds written across it. I find the buzz of houseflies on the surface of masking tape, an air raid siren on the flattened sepal of an orchid, and then the discovery of discoveries along a small piece of copper, fragments of a sentence from Nixon's checkers speech. Extraordinary enough, but in rotating the specimen tiny fractions of a degree of arc and running the same area under the brushes, I hear a crowd outdoors, as though in a reverberant piazza, the ebb and swell of its volume a shadowy remnant of Nixon's cadence, as though one were listening to a cross-section of his voice. With additional incremental rotations, the same bit of copper yields in succession a crew of seamen singing a chanty, the whine of a fleet of Formula One engines, gale force winds through high-tension wires, elephants. Whole taxonomies propagate in my imagination, not just categories of sounds, but of hidden systems of signs, that an exhaustive history of the world should be written in sound across the surfaces of things, that the visible appearance of objects be the offspring, though intermediated by Amphion-like phases hopelessly complex, of events which themselves arise from the collusion of forces and material that, ellipsis. Thus the direction of my thoughts when I heard Klaus hissing at me, "Hey, care to join us here in space-time?"